They whispered his name in darkened corridors, voices dropping to horrified murmurs. Dane Ashford, the unconquerable. But conquest had nothing to do with battlefields. It had everything to do with what 17 noble ladies discovered on their wedding nights before fleeing his chambers in tears. He stood now in the Hall of Mirrors, alone as always, 6p8 of raw alpha dominance wrapped in ceremonial black leather. Midnight hair fell past his shoulders, silver eyes cold as winter steel. The oracle had blessed him at birth, strength beyond measure, a body built to protect, a heart that will break before it bends. They'd forgotten to mention the curse hidden in the blessing. Lady Helena Voss had been rejection number 17. She'd lasted 3 minutes in his chambers before her scream shattered every window on the eastern wing. The servants found her dress torn, not by violence, but by her own hands as she clawed her way to the door. "Unnatural," she'd sobbed to the council. "Not even human. I'd sooner die than—" The rest was lost to hysterics. Dane dismissed his advisors, sent away the healers with their useless measurements and pitying eyes. He stood in the Hall of Mirrors and did what he always did after a rejection. He looked at his reflection and tried to see the monster they saw. He saw only a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched without fear. But tonight, everything would change. Tonight, a woman with silver blonde hair and defiant jade eyes would crash through his life like a comet, bleeding and desperate, asking for sanctuary. And Dane Ashford would learn that sometimes the things that make you different aren't curses. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to see them as gifts. Quick question, lovely. What would you do if the world convinced you that you were too much to ever be loved? If this story is already tugging at your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to Velvet Romance Library. I'm working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps this channel grow more than you know. Now, let's return to the moment fate intervened. The night markets of Ashford City burned. Seraphina Vale ran through smoke and chaos. Her servant's dress torn, bare feet slapping against cobblestones, still warm from the fires. Behind her, the traders who'd purchased her from the Omega Registry shouted commands, their hunting party cutting through the panicked crowds. She'd been marked as defective stock, an Omega whose scent was too weak, whose submission instinct never manifested, whose sharp tongue had earned her 3 separate lashings in the breeding compound. The traders planned to recoup their losses by selling her to the fighting pits, where defective Omegas were used as practice for young alphas learning to claim. Seraphina would die before she let them touch her again. She vaulted over a merchant's cart, ignored the burning in her lungs, and made a desperate choice. The palace gates stood open, a security failure during the market fire. She slipped through, into the royal gardens where moonlight turned everything silver and dangerous. She didn't see him until it was too late. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. She'd run full force into what felt like a stone wall covered in warm silk. Strong hands, impossibly large hands, caught her before she hit the ground, steadying her with a gentleness that contradicted their size. "Please." The word escaped her lips before she could think. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat. "Please, they'll put me in the pits. I'll do anything. Clean your stables, scrub your floors. Just breathe." The voice rumbled through his chest like distant thunder, deep and commanding, but somehow careful. You're safe. Breathe first, then talk. Seraphina's survival instincts screamed at her to look up, to assess the threat. She lifted her head slowly, and up, and up. Silver eyes met hers, framed by a face so sharply beautiful it didn't seem real. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, shadowed with stubble. Lips pressed into a firm line. His dark hair fell loose around his shoulders, and his chest, bare, except for the ceremonial leather straps crossing it, bore scars that spoke of battles won. She knew him immediately. Everyone knew him. Alpha King Dane Ashford, the unconquerable, the unwanted. Your Majesty. She tried to step back, but his hands remained on her arms, steadying her. I didn't mean to. The gates were open because of the fire. And the men chasing you. His eyes hadn't left her face. They hurt you. It wasn't really a question. His nostrils flared slightly, and she realized he could smell the blood, the fear, the distinctive chemical tang of the suppression drugs they'd forced down her throat to keep her compliant. They own me, she said, the words bitter ash on her tongue. Registry papers. Legal sale. I'm defective merchandise they're trying to salvage. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity. She would have hated pity. Something darker. Fury. Cold. And controlled. No one owns anyone in my city, he said quietly. Not anymore. Footsteps echoed through the garden. Torchlight flickered between the hedges. There! A trader's voice, thick with authority and entitlement. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but that Omega is stolen property. We have documentation. Dane didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The word fell like a judge's gavel, final and absolute. He turned slowly, and Seraphina felt the shift in the air as his alpha presence unfurled like dark wings. The trader stumbled backward. Let me see these documents that claim you can own a person. The lead trader, emboldened by legal right and the king's notorious isolation, stepped forward with papers. The Omega Registry, sire. All legitimate. She was purchased for breeding stock, but proved defective. We're simply reclaiming our investment before. Dane took the papers, read them with silver eyes that grew colder with each line. Then he tore them in half. The Omega Registry, he said softly, dangerously, was abolished by royal decree 6 months ago. Any documentation claiming ownership of a person is now evidence of trafficking. You're standing in my garden, holding proof of your crimes, demanding I return your property. He took a single step forward. Just one. All 3 traders ran. Silence settled over the garden, broken only by the distant sounds of the market fire being controlled. Seraphina stared at the king's broad back, watching his shoulders rise and fall with carefully measured breaths. Thank you, she whispered. He turned back to her, and she saw something unexpected in those silver eyes. Not the cold distance she'd heard about, not the bitter isolation, loneliness, raw and aching. You're bleeding. He gestured to her feet, where cuts from broken glass and rough stone had left crimson prints on the pale stone. Let me. He paused, uncertainty flickering across his features. May I help you inside? There's a healer, and rooms where you'll be safe. The way he asked, as if she might refuse him, as if he expected her to, broke something in her chest. Yes, she said. Please. He nodded once, then did something that shocked her into stillness. He knelt, right there on the bloody stones, and held out his arms. "I'm going to carry you. The palace is a quarter-mile, and you're hurt. Is that acceptable?" 17 noble ladies had run from this man. Seraphina looked at him kneeling in the moonlight, this powerful king making himself smaller, asking permission to help. And she understood something the nobles never would. Monsters don't ask permission. "Yes," she said again. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest with hands that could crush stone, but held her like she was made of starlight. She felt the leashed power in him, the careful control in every movement. As they walked through the moonlit gardens toward the palace, Seraphina pressed her ear to his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, safe. She didn't know that in 3 weeks, she'd run through fire to save this heart. She didn't know that her touch would teach him he wasn't cursed. She only knew that for the first time in her life, she felt protected instead of possessed, and that made all the difference. The royal healer's chambers smelled of herbs and antiseptic. Dane set Seraphina on the examination table with excruciating care, then immediately stepped back, putting distance between them. "Healer Moss will tend your wounds," he said, his voice formal now, walls rising. "She's discreet and kind. You'll be given rooms in the East Wing, private, with locks that only you control. No one will enter without your permission." "Not even you?" Seraphina asked. His jaw tightened. "Especially not me." Before she could ask what he meant, he left, the door closing with a soft finality that felt wrong. Healer Moss was indeed kind, a woman in her 60s with gentle hands and knowing eyes. As she cleaned Seraphina's wounds, she spoke quietly. "You're the first person he's brought here himself in 5 years. The rumors say he's cruel," Seraphina said. "Violent. That he—" "The rumors," Moss interrupted gently, "are weapons used by people who fear what they don't understand." She wrapped Seraphina's feet in clean bandages. "The king is the gentlest man I've ever known, which is precisely why they call him a monster." Seraphina spent 3 days in those private rooms, recovering. Dane sent meals, sent books, sent everything she could need, but he never came himself. On the 4th day, she went looking for him. She found him in the training yard at dawn, shirtless and sparring with a combat dummy that had clearly seen better days. His body was magnificent, all lean muscle and controlled power, scars mapping his torso like a constellation of old battles. He moved like water, fast and fluid, every strike perfectly measured. He saw her watching and immediately grabbed his shirt, self-consciousness flickering across his face. "Don't," she said, echoing his own words from that first night. "Please." His hands stilled on the fabric. "You should rest. Your feet are healing because of you." She walked closer, noting how he tensed, how he shifted his weight as if preparing to retreat. "Why won't you visit me?" "It's improper." "That's not the real reason." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Come with me." He led her to his private study, a room lined with books and battle maps. He poured them both water from a crystal pitcher, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Something I should have told you that first night. But I was selfish. You looked at me like I was a man instead of a monster, and I wanted to keep that look for just a little longer." Seraphina's heart clenched. "What is it?" "There's a reason I've never taken a queen. A reason 17 women have fled my chambers." He finally met her gaze, and the pain in his silver eyes was devastating. I'm anatomically disproportionate. The healers say it's a genetic anomaly in my bloodline. Everything about me is built on a larger scale, and that includes— He couldn't finish. The shame on his face said everything. The oracle called it a blessing, he continued bitterly. A body built to protect. But protection requires closeness, and closeness requires— He gestured helplessly. The ladies weren't wrong to run. The first one said I'd kill her. The healer confirmed it was a possibility, so I stopped trying. Seraphina processed this, her mind working through the implications. Did anyone ever ask what you wanted? He blinked. What? These healers who measured you. These ladies who ran? Did anyone ask if you wanted a loveless, political marriage? Or did they just decide you were a problem to be solved? I'm the king. I need an heir. You're a man first, she interrupted fiercely. A man who's been told his body is wrong, instead of being asked what he needs. When was the last time someone touched you with kindness? The question hit him like a physical blow. Not since my mother died. 10 years ago. 10 years. 10 years of isolation, of being feared and rejected, of believing himself monstrous. Seraphina stood and crossed to him, slowly, giving him every chance to retreat. She placed her palm over his heart. It thundered beneath her hand, fast and frightened. I'm touching you now, she said softly. Do you feel like a monster? Seraphina, do you? No, his voice broke. I feel human. She stood on her toes and pressed her forehead to his chest, wrapping her arms around his waist. He stood frozen, barely breathing, as if any movement might shatter the moment. Thank you, she whispered, for saving me, for asking permission, for making yourself smaller so I could feel safe. Thank you for being gentle, even though the world told you gentleness was weakness. His arms came up slowly, carefully, enfolding her with such tender hesitation it made her want to cry. She felt him shaking, this powerful alpha king, trembling because someone was hugging him. I don't know what to do, he admitted against her hair. I don't know how to be close to someone without hurting them. Then we learn together, she said simply, because I don't know how to trust people, and you don't know how to be trusted. Seems like we're perfectly matched. His laugh was surprised and genuine, rumbling through his chest. You're remarkable. I'm defective stock, remember? You're perfect. The words were fierce, certain, and anyone who told you otherwise was blind. They stood there in the morning light, two broken people holding each other carefully, learning that maybe broken pieces fit together better than perfect ones. Outside the study, Chancellor Garrett Thorne watched through the narrow window, his jaw clenched with fury. Beside him, Lady Helena Voss, rejection number 17, smiled like a blade. She's made him weak, Garrett murmured. Good, Helena replied. Weak kings are easy to overthrow. Over the next 2 weeks, Seraphina and Dane learned each other in careful increments. He taught her to read battle maps, his deep voice patient as he explained strategies. She taught him to laugh again, her sharp wit cutting through his careful formality until genuine smiles broke through. They walked the gardens at dusk, his hand hovering near the small of her back, never touching without permission, always asking. She leaned into him anyway, claiming space against his side, teaching him that closeness didn't have to mean harm. Tell me about your family, she asked one evening as they sat by the fountain. His expression shuddered. My father died in battle when I was 15. My mother, pain flickered across his face. She took her own life 2 years later. The isolation had broken her. She'd been mated to my father, and when he died, the bond break drove her mad with grief. I'm sorry. She told me before she died that my body was a gift, not a curse, that someday I'd find someone who understood. His silver eyes met hers. I stopped believing her. Until you. Seraphina's throat tightened. My family sold me to pay gambling debts. I was 12. The registry kept me until I was 18, training me to be proper, submissive, quiet, obedient. I failed every evaluation. She smiled bitterly. Turns out, I'm not very good at erasing myself. Good, Dane said fiercely. Don't ever erase yourself. Not for anyone. The moment stretched between them, charged with something deeper than friendship. Seraphina felt it building, this pull toward him, this desire to know him completely. Dane, she said, softly, can I ask you something? Anything. The ladies who ran, did you love any of them? He shook his head. They were political arrangements. I barely knew their names. Then maybe, she said carefully, the problem wasn't your body. Maybe it was that they didn't love you enough to try. His breath caught. Seraphina, I'm not afraid of you. She took his hand, dwarfed by his palm. I'm not saying I know what the future holds, or that I'm ready for everything. But I want you to know that when I look at you, I don't see something wrong. I see someone worth knowing. You don't understand what you're saying. His voice was anguished. The physical reality is something we'd figure out together if we ever got there, which we won't if you keep pushing me away because you're so convinced you're a monster. I could hurt you. You won't. How can you be so certain? She placed his massive hand against her throat, that vulnerable column where he could feel her pulse, fast and trusting. Because you're shaking. Because you asked permission to carry me when I was bleeding. Because you've spent 10 years alone rather than risk causing pain. That's not a monster, Dane. That's a man with more self-control than anyone I've ever met. He stared at their joined hands, his expression raw with wonder and fear and desperate hope. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. Neither do I, so we'll figure it out together. The kiss happened slowly. He cupped her face with trembling hands, giving her every chance to pull away. When their lips finally met, it was soft, tentative, perfect. She felt his restraint in every careful touch, the way he held himself back, even in this. You can touch me, she murmured against his mouth. I won't break. His arms came around her then, pulling her close, but never tight, always giving her space to breathe. The kiss deepened, and Seraphina felt him shuddering with the effort of control, the war between wanting and fearing. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. No one's ever kissed me. Before, he admitted. They never stayed long enough. Then we have a lot of catching up to do, she said, and pulled him back down. They spent the evening in his study, talking and laughing and stealing kisses like teenagers. For the first time in a decade, Dane let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved this happiness. He should have known it wouldn't last. The next morning, Chancellor Thorne called an emergency council session. Dane arrived to find the entire noble council assembled, faces grave with manufactured concern. Your Majesty, Thorne began, we must discuss the Omega you've brought into the palace. There are concerns. Seraphina is under my protection, Dane said flatly. There's nothing to discuss. On the contrary, Lady Helena stepped forward, her expression a perfect mask of worried innocence. We've received disturbing reports about her past. The traders she fled from have come forward with testimony that she's dangerous, unstable. She attacked several guards during her time at the registry, sent one to the healers with severe injuries. Dane's jaw clenched. She defended herself from abuse. That's not instability. That's survival. Perhaps, Thorne said smoothly. But there's more. We've also discovered that her family didn't sell her to pay debts. They sold her because she showed signs of violent delusion, claimed to see visions, spoke of conspiracies that didn't exist. Her own parents deemed her a danger. It was a masterful lie, woven with just enough truth to be believable. I don't believe you, Dane said. We have testimonies, signed documents. Helena's smile was poisonous sympathy. Your Majesty, we understand you're lonely, that you've been rejected repeatedly, and this girl offered you something you've been desperate for. But clouding your judgment with sentiment could be dangerous, for you and for the kingdom. She's making you weak, Thorne added. The people have noticed. You smile now, you're distracted. A king cannot afford such vulnerabilities. The council murmured agreement. Every face showed concern, false, calculated concern designed to look like loyalty. I want to see these documents, Dane said coldly. They produced them within the hour, beautifully forged, bearing official seals and convincing details. Her father's signature, her mother's testimony, registry records of violence and instability. All lies, but paper lies are harder to fight than spoken ones. Dane dismissed the council and sat alone in his throne room, documents scattered before him. His rational mind knew this was manipulation. His heart knew Seraphina was honest and true. But 10 years of rejection had taught him to doubt himself, to believe he was the problem, to think his judgment was flawed by desperation. What if they were right? What if he was so starved for connection that he'd imagined her goodness? What if his need had made him blind? He was still sitting there when Seraphina found him at dusk, her face bright with excitement. Dane, I found this amazing book about ancient alpha bloodlines in the library. And there's a section that mentions... She stopped when she saw his expression. What's wrong? Tell me about your family. His voice was flat, emotionless. The truth. Something flickered in her eyes, hurt. I told you the truth. They sold me. Because of debts? Or because you were dangerous? The hurt blossomed into shock. What? No, Were you violent at the registry? Did you attack the guards? I defended myself when they... Dane, what is this? He stood, using his height to intimidate for the first time since they'd met. Did you lie to me about your past? No! Her voice rose, desperate. I told you everything. Who's been saying... The council has documents, testimonies. Your own parents, my parents who sold me like livestock? Anger flashed in her jade eyes now. And you believe them over me? I don't know what to believe anymore. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stepped back, and he saw the moment her heart broke. I see, she said quietly. 10 years alone taught you that you're the monster. So when people tell you I'm dangerous, you believe them. Because it's easier to think I'm broken than to believe someone could actually want you. Seraphina? No. Tears streamed down her face. You were right that first day. Monsters don't ask permission, but cowards don't trust the people who love them. She turned and ran from the throne room, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Dane stood frozen, watching her go, that last word echoing in his mind. Love. She'd said love, and he'd thrown it back in her face because he was too afraid to believe he deserved it. By the time he reached her rooms, she was gone. The window stood open, curtains billowing in the night breeze. On the bed lay a single note in her careful handwriting. You saved me once. Now save yourself. From the real monsters, wearing noble faces, the wine. Tomorrow's victory feast is poisoned. Check the cellars. Trust yourself. S. Dane's blood ran cold. Victory feast. Tomorrow night, celebrating the peace treaty with the Northern Territories. The entire kingdom would be there, and Seraphina had run into the night to warn him. Even after he'd broken her heart, he looked at the note again, seeing what he'd missed in his blind panic. She'd signed it S, like she knew she'd never write him another letter. Like this was goodbye. Guards! His roar shook the palace. Find her! Search every street, every building. Find her now! But Seraphina was already gone, disappeared into the city she barely knew, running from the man she loved because he'd proven too broken to love her back. And, in the wine cellars beneath the palace, vials of slow-acting poison waited in the ceremonial bottles, placed there by Chancellor Thorne's own hands. The trap was set, the king was isolated, and the woman who could have saved him was gone. Seraphina ran until her healing feet screamed in protest. She had nowhere to go, no friends in this city, no money, no safe haven, but she couldn't stay in the palace, couldn't watch Dane look at her with that terrible doubt in his silver eyes. She'd been a fool. She'd let herself believe in fairy tales, in a king who could love a defective Omega, in the possibility of something real. The city at night was dangerous for lone Omegas. She kept to the shadows, avoiding the main streets where hunters prowled for unacclaimed females. Her registry training, all those lessons in being invisible and small, finally served a purpose. She was moving through a narrow alley when she heard it. Voices, hushed and urgent. By tomorrow night, once the king drinks the wine, the alpha rage will be uncontrollable. Seraphina froze, pressing herself against the cold brick wall. And the Omega? That was a woman's voice, cultured and cruel. Lady Helena will be found in his chambers, torn apart. Everyone will believe he finally snapped. Chancellor Thorne's voice, smug with certainty. The council will have no choice but to execute him for her murder. I'll take the throne under Regency law, and you'll be my queen. What about her note? She might have warned him. A note from an unstable Omega with a documented history of delusion? Who would believe her? They laughed together, the sound making Seraphina's blood run cold. She had to warn him, had to make him believe her, even if he hated her, even if she had to watch him doubt her again. She couldn't let them murder him. She turned to run back to the palace and collided with a massive chest. Well, well. The traitor from that first night grinned down at her, his companions flanking him in the alley. The defective Omega. You cost us a lot of money, girl. Time to recoup our investment. Seraphina ran. They chased her through the twisting alleys, their boots thundering on cobblestones. She was faster, more desperate, but they knew the city better. They herded her toward the warehouse district, cutting off escape routes. She burst through a broken fence into an abandoned shipyard. The river stretched before her, dark and cold and final. Nowhere to run now, the lead trader said, advancing slowly. We'll deliver you to the pits, collect our bounty, and she's under the king's protection. The voice came from the darkness behind them, deep and deadly calm. Dane stepped into the moonlight. He'd come alone, tracking her scent through the city streets. Now he stood between Seraphina and the traitors, and the alpha presence rolling off him made the air itself feel heavy. "The king," the traitor sneered, emboldened by numbers. "Come to collect his pet? She's ours by... she's mine." The word was quiet, absolute, terrifying in its certainty. "And you're going to walk away. Now. There's 3 of us, and 1 of you, Your Majesty." Dane smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "I've been very, very gentle for 10 years, he said, softly. "Careful not to hurt anyone, not to lose control. Do you know how much restraint that requires?" He took a step forward. The traitors stumbled back. "Do you know what happens when I stop being gentle?" The alpha presence exploded outward, raw, overwhelming, suffocating dominance that sent all 3 traitors to their knees. They couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only shake under the weight of his power. "Leave this city," Dane said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "Touch another Omega, and I'll find you. And I'll show you exactly what an anatomical anomaly can do when he stops holding back." The traitors fled, scrambling over each other in their panic. Dane turned to Seraphina. The lethal control slipped, and she saw past it to the anguish beneath. "You warned me," he said hoarsely. "You ran because I hurt you, and you still came back to warn me about the poison. I couldn't let them kill you. Why?" He took a step closer, hands shaking. "After what I said to you, because I love you, you idiot." The words burst from her, angry and desperate. "Because you're gentle and kind, and you've been hurt so badly that you expect it from everyone. Because I look at you and see someone worth saving, even when you can't see it yourself, Seraphina, and I know you don't believe me. I know you think I'm dangerous or unstable or whatever lies they fed you. But I don't care. Tomorrow they're going to poison your wine at the victory feast, and Chancellor Thorne and Lady Helena are planning to frame me for your murder, so Thorne can take the throne. So you need to—" He kissed her, not gentle this time, desperate and fierce and apologetic, his massive hands cradling her face like she was every precious thing he'd ever lost. When he pulled back, tears tracked down his scarred cheeks. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I was afraid. I've been rejected so many times that I convinced myself you'd be the same eventually. That I wasn't enough. That I was—" "You are enough," she said fiercely. "You are more than enough. And I'm not them. I'm not going to run, even knowing what I am. Especially knowing what you are." She pulled his face down to hers. "You're mine, Dane Ashford, and I'm not letting them take you." His arms came around her, lifting her off her feet, holding her like he'd never let go. "We need to get back to the palace," he said against her hair. "We need proof of the conspiracy before the feast. I know where they keep the poison. I heard them talking. It's in the wine cellars." "Then that's where we start." They made it back to the palace as dawn broke. Dane moved like a man with purpose now. The doubt burned away. He gathered his most trusted guards, men who'd served his father, who knew loyalty from corruption. In the wine cellars, they found exactly what Seraphina had described. Vials of clear liquid, hidden behind false stones, and more damning, letters between Thorne and Helena, detailing every step of their plan. Dane read them with cold fury building in his chest. "They counted on my isolation," he said quietly, "on me being too broken to trust anyone. They almost won." "But they didn't," Seraphina said, taking his hand, "because you trusted me when it mattered." Healer Moss examined the poison. "This is sophisticated. It would trigger genuine alpha rage. Violent, uncontrollable. Combined with your Majesty's size and strength." She shook her head. "They would have found her body torn apart. And no one would question that you'd finally lost control." "How long would I have suffered before they executed me?" Dane asked. "The rage would last hours. By the end, you'd be begging them to end it." His hands clenched into fists. "Gather the council, the full court, every noble, every dignitary here for the feast. We're moving the celebration forward to this evening." "Your Majesty." The head guard looked confused. Dane's smile was sharp and cold. "They want a feast? We'll give them one. But the entertainment will be slightly different than planned." The grand hall glittered with candlelight and expensive fabric. Every noble family in the kingdom had gathered for the victory feast, their faces masks of celebration, hiding various personal agendas. Chancellor Thorne sat 3 seats from the head table, satisfaction barely contained. Lady Helena wore crimson silk, her smile sharp as she watched the servants place the ceremonial wine before the king's seat. What neither of them noticed were the additional guards lining the walls, 40 instead of the usual 20, or the way Healer Moss had positioned herself near the servants' entrance, or the absence of a certain silver-blonde Omega. The feast began with traditional toasts. Dane stood, raising the ceremonial chalice, and the hall fell silent in anticipation. "My people," he began, his deep voice carrying to every corner. "Tonight we celebrate peace with our northern neighbors. But peace requires truth, and truth requires courage." He set the chalice down untouched. "Some of you may have heard rumors about an Omega I brought into the palace, Seraphina Vale, who I'm told is dangerous, unstable, violent." His silver eyes swept the room, landing on Thorne. "These documents provided to my council detail her supposed mental instability, her family's testimony about her delusions." Thorne shifted in his seat, uncertain where this was going. "I'd like to introduce you to someone." Dane gestured to the servants' entrance. Seraphina stepped into the hall, wearing a simple blue gown, her silver blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She walked with her head high, refusing to be cowed by the stares and whispers. "Lady Seraphina," Dane continued, "would you tell us about these delusions you suffered?" She met his eyes, seeing the plan there, trusting him completely. "Of course, Your Majesty." Her voice rang clear. "I had delusions that Chancellor Thorne and Lady Helena were conspiring to poison you at this feast. Delusions that they'd hidden vials of a substance in the wine cellars that would trigger fatal alpha rage." Gasps rippled through the hall. Helena's face paled. "I was delusional enough," Seraphina continued, her voice steady, "to believe they planned to frame me for your death, to make it look like you'd lost control and killed me, so the council would execute you, and Chancellor Thorne could claim the throne under Regency law." "Lies!" Thorne shot to his feet. "This is madness, the word of an unstable Omega." "Funny thing about delusions," Dane interrupted quietly. "Sometimes they're just the truth that no one wants to hear. Guards, bring the evidence." The guards entered, carrying a chest. Inside were the vials, the letters, everything found in the wine cellar. Healer Moss stepped forward. "I've tested the substance in these vials," she announced. It's a rare poison that specifically targets alpha brain chemistry, triggering uncontrollable rage. In someone of His Majesty's size and strength, it would be devastating. The hall erupted in chaos. "Test the wine!" someone shouted. The ceremonial chalice was brought forward. Healer Moss added a few drops of testing solution. The wine turned black as ink. "Poisoned," she confirmed. Thorn was still trying to bluster. "Anyone could have planted that poison." "Your letters are quite detailed, Chancellor." Dane's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You describe the poison. You detail the plan. You even specify that Seraphina's body should be convincingly mauled to ensure I'd be executed immediately." He picked up one of the letters and read aloud. "The beast will finally prove himself a monster, and the kingdom will thank us for ending his reign. The throne will be mine, and the Omega sacrifice will be remembered as the tragedy that saved us all." Thorn's face crumbled. "You don't understand. You're dangerous. Your father was dangerous. That bloodline should have ended." "My father," Dane said coldly, "was the gentlest man I ever knew. He spent his entire reign proving that strength and kindness aren't opposites. You killed him, didn't you?" The hall went silent. "That battle wound that claimed him, it wasn't from the enemy, was it?" Thorn's silence was answer enough. "Guards," Dane said. "Take him. And Lady Helena. They'll stand trial for conspiracy, attempted murder, and treason." As the guards moved forward, Helena screamed, "He's a freak! A monster! No woman can survive him. I tried. You all know the truth." "The truth," Seraphina said clearly, stepping forward, "is that you were too weak to accept someone different. The truth is that you ran from a good man because your courage failed. Don't blame his body for your cowardice." The guards dragged them both away, their protests fading into the distance. Dane turned to face the assembled court. "For 10 years, I've hidden myself because I believed I was wrong, broken, too much for anyone to accept. I let myself be isolated because I thought it was better to be lonely than to be rejected." He reached for Seraphina, and she took his hand without hesitation. "This woman taught me something the noble ladies never could. She taught me that being different isn't the same as being wrong. That size doesn't determine worth. That love isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly. It's about finding someone who chooses you, completely, and without reservation." He turned to her, ignoring the hundreds of watching eyes, and knelt on one knee. "Seraphina Vale, you ran through fire for me. You risked everything to save me. Even after I broke your heart with my doubt, you see me, truly see me, when everyone else sees only what they fear." From his pocket, he drew a ring, ancient silver with a moonstone that caught the light. "Will you marry me? Will you stand beside me and prove to this kingdom that love is stronger than fear? That difference is something to celebrate, not condemn?" Tears streamed down Seraphina's face. "Yes, always yes." The hall exploded in applause as Dane stood and kissed her, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. His massive hands cradled her face tenderly, and the court could see what 17 noble ladies had been too blind to notice. The way he touched her like she was precious. The way he held his strength in check. The way love had transformed isolation into connection. When they finally pulled apart, Seraphina whispered against his lips, "You're not too much. You're exactly enough." "And you're not defective," he murmured back. "You're perfect." That night, as celebration continued below, they stood on their balcony, watching the city lights. "Are you afraid?" Dane asked quietly. "About everything that comes next?" Seraphina considered. "I'm nervous," she admitted, "but not afraid, because I know you'll be careful with me. I know you'll listen. I know we'll figure it out, together." "What if I can't?" She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Then we'll find other ways. There are 1,000 ways to be intimate, Dane. Physical joining is just one of them. And if that's not possible, or if it takes time and patience and creativity to make it work, then that's what we'll do." "You deserve better than—" "I deserve you," she interrupted fiercely. "All of you, exactly as you are. Stop trying to convince me I should want something different." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You saw me," she said simply. "When everyone else saw defective stock, you saw a person worth saving. You gave me the same gift I'm giving you, the gift of being truly seen." They stood there in the starlight, two people the world had told were wrong, proving that sometimes the perfect match is the one no one expects. 3 months later, the royal gardens bloomed with spring flowers. The entire kingdom had been invited to witness the wedding of their king to a commoner Omega, a scandal that had somehow transformed into the most romantic story anyone could remember. Seraphina stood in the bridal chamber, staring at her reflection. The dress was simple ivory silk that flowed like water, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Her silver blonde hair was woven with moonflowers, and her jade eyes sparkled with nerves and excitement. Healer Moss stood behind her, adjusting the veil. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the moment he knelt in the garden and asked permission to help me," Seraphina said softly. The ceremony was held outdoors under ancient oak trees, with the entire court and hundreds of common citizens in attendance. Dane stood at the altar in formal ceremonial armor, polished until it gleamed like starlight. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face. When he saw Seraphina walking toward him, his breath stopped. She was radiant, not because of the dress or the flowers, but because she walked with absolute confidence, with joy, with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was choosing. The priestess began the traditional vows, but both bride and groom had additions prepared. Dane spoke first, his deep voice carrying across the crowd. "Seraphina, I vow to never let my sighs become your cage. I vow to ask permission before assuming, to listen before acting, to trust your judgment even when my doubts whisper otherwise. I vow to see you clearly, not as defective, not as broken, but as the strongest person I've ever known. And I vow to spend every day earning the trust you've given me." There wasn't a dry eye in the assembly. Seraphina's voice rang clear. "Dane, I vow to see you always as you are, not the monster they imagined, not even the king they crowned, but the man who makes himself smaller so others can feel safe. I vow to remind you daily that you deserve to take up space, to be loved, to be touched with kindness. I vow to be patient, to be honest, to build a life with you that proves difference isn't something to fear. It's something to celebrate." The priestess could barely speak through her tears. "By the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may—" Dane didn't wait. He lifted Seraphina carefully, mindfully, and kissed her with everything he had. 10 years of loneliness, 3 months of healing, a lifetime of love, compressed into one perfect moment. The crowd roared their approval. The celebration that followed would be talked about for generations. Nobles danced with commoners. Omegas walked freely without fear. And at the center of it all, the king and his queen moved together, her small frame tucked perfectly against his massive one, proving that love isn't about matching proportions. It's about matching hearts. As evening fell, Seraphina and Dane stood on their private balcony, the sounds of celebration drifting up from below. "Are you nervous?" she asked, quietly, reading the tension in his shoulders. "Terrified," he admitted. "Not of you, never of you, but of failing you. Of this one thing I can't control." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with steady, jade eyes. "Dane, listen to me. Whatever happens tonight, whether we manage complete intimacy or not, doesn't define us, doesn't define you. We have a lifetime to figure this out. But I deserve a husband who loves me, who respects me, who makes me laugh and holds me when I'm afraid. I have that. Everything else is just details we'll work through together. What if I hurt you? You won't. But if you're worried, we go slow. We stop whenever you need to. We figure out what works for us, not what worked for anyone else." He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing deeply. "How are you so brave?" "I'm not brave. I just love you enough to trust you." That night, in their chambers with moonlight streaming through the windows, they learned each other slowly, carefully, with patience and creativity and love. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of hesitation, of nervousness, of having to pause and readjust. But there were also moments of laughter, actual laughter, as they figured things out together. Moments of tenderness so profound it brought tears. Moments of connection that had nothing to do with physical joining and everything to do with trust. And in the end, they learned what the 17 noble ladies never understood. Love isn't about fitting perfectly together. It's about choosing each other despite, and sometimes because of, the differences. When they finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, both exhausted and happy, Dane whispered against her hair, "Thank you for not running. Thank you for being worth staying for," she murmured back. Outside their windows, the kingdom slept peacefully, protected by a king who'd finally learned that his greatest strength wasn't his size or his power. It was his capacity to love gently in a world that had taught him to be hard. 1 year later, the palace gardens had been transformed into a sanctuary for rescued Omegas. Seraphina's Omega Protection Act had passed unanimously, abolishing all remaining registry laws and establishing safe houses throughout the kingdom. Queen Seraphina walked through the gardens, now visibly pregnant, one hand resting on her swollen belly. She stopped to speak with each rescued Omega, listening to their stories, ensuring they felt heard and protected. Dane found her there at sunset, as he always did. He approached from behind, wrapping his arms gently around her, his massive hands covering hers on their child. "How are my 2 favorite people?" he murmured against her neck. "Your child is using my ribs as a punching bag," she said, laughing. "I'm pretty sure they inherited your size." A flicker of fear crossed his face. "If the birth is dangerous, then Healer Moss will handle it. She's already prepared for every possibility." Seraphina turned in his arms. "Stop borrowing worry From tomorrow, Your Majesty. I can't help it. You're everything to me, and you're everything to me, which is why you need to trust that I'm strong enough for this." Their child kicked hard, and Dane's eyes widened in wonder. He dropped to his knees, pressing his face gently to her belly. "Easy, little one," he whispered. "Your mother needs her ribs intact." Seraphina ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed by love for the man who'd learned to be gentle in a world that demanded he be hard. In the distance, they could see the city they'd transformed together. Omega safe houses dotted every district. New laws protected the vulnerable. And at the center of it all stood a king who'd proven that true strength wasn't domination. It was restraint. It was choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. It was being gentle when the world expected a monster. "Tell them," Seraphina said softly, gesturing to her belly. "Tell them the story." Dane smiled and spoke to their unborn child. Once upon a time, there was a king who believed he was too much for anyone to love, and a queen who proved that too much was just right for her. They taught a kingdom that difference isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate. And they loved each other fiercely, gently, completely, every single day. "Perfect bedtime story," Seraphina said, tears in her eyes. "It's our story, the only one that matters." As the sun set over their kingdom, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, King Dane and Queen Seraphina stood together. Two people society had deemed wrong, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones no one expects. Because real love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other completely and without reservation every single day. Thank you so much for joining me on Dane and Seraphina's journey. If their story touched your heart, please subscribe to Velvet Romance Library and hit in that notification bell. Drop a comment telling me what was your favorite moment and where are you watching from. Your support means everything as we grow this community of romance lovers together. Until next time, remember, you are not too much, and you are always enough, exactly as you are.